Criss Angel has built his name on illusions, making the impossible seem real. But behind the stage lights, there's a life story more haunting than any trick. From his meteoric rise as a magician who redefined the craft, to a devastating family battle with his young son's cancer, Angel has endured triumph and heartbreak. And now, whispers of the staggering fortune he's set to leave behind reveal a legacy that has his family in tears. But what will become of that empire? Tonight, we go inside the life, pain, and fortune of Criss Angel and uncover the shocking truth about what he leaves behind. Christopher Nicholas Sarantakos, who the world would later know as Criss Angel, was born on December 19, 1967, in Hempstead, New York. His family lived a modest, working-class life in East Meadow, Long Island. His father, John, owned a restaurant and donut shop, while his mother, Dimitra, was the heart of the home, instilling in her children Greek-American traditions and values. They didn't live with luxury, but there was warmth and stability, enough to shape a boy who dreamed bigger than the walls around him. At the age of 7, Criss received a magic kit that would forever alter the course of his life. For most children, such a gift was a temporary distraction, but for Criss, it became an obsession. He practiced tricks endlessly, sometimes locking himself in his room for hours, staring into a mirror and rehearsing every sleight of hand, every coin vanish, and every card manipulation until it looked effortless. His family began to notice that this was no passing phase. It was something that consumed him entirely. By middle school, Criss was performing for family gatherings, neighbors, and classmates. He wasn't just showing tricks. He was learning how to command attention, how to manipulate atmosphere, and how to make people feel awe. The influence of Harry Houdini loomed large over his imagination. He didn't just want to amaze. He wanted to conquer fear, to push human limits, to blur the line between reality and illusion. His parents watched with mixed emotions. His father respected the discipline, but urged him to consider stability, while his mother, though proud, feared his ambitions would only lead to disappointment. But Criss was determined. He was a quiet child in many ways, almost withdrawn in school, but whenever a deck of cards or a coin was in his hands, he lit up. Even then, it seemed destiny had chosen him. Magic wasn't entertainment for him, it was survival, purpose, and identity. By the mid-2000s, Criss wasn't just a magician, he had become a global phenomenon. Mindfreak was pulling in millions of viewers each week, and with every new stunt, his reputation grew. But Criss wasn't satisfied with television alone. He saw himself as more than an entertainer. He was a brand, and he began to build that brand into a financial empire. His merchandise line exploded. Posters, DVDs, clothing, even jewelry carried his Gothic logo. Fans weren't just watching him, they wanted to dress like him, live like him, embody his dark rock star persona. Criss leaned into it, carefully cultivating an image that was equal parts magician, musician, and rebel. This branding wasn't accidental. Every eyeliner smudge, every chain, every tattoo was part of a persona that made him instantly recognizable. But the true financial turning point was Las Vegas. In 2008, Criss launched Believe at the Luxor Hotel, a residency produced in partnership with Cirque du Soleil. The project was ambitious, combining his death-defying illusions with Cirque's theatrical artistry. The show was expensive to stage, and its first reviews were brutal. Critics panned it for being disjointed and self-indulgent. Yet the controversy drew audiences, and ticket sales remained strong. Over time, the show was reworked, evolving into a darker, tighter production that became a staple of the Strip. Vegas cemented Criss as one of the highest-paid magicians in history, rivaling legends like David Copperfield. He poured millions into stage design, pushing boundaries with technology to make his illusions bigger and bolder. He became known not only as a performer, but also as an innovator, someone willing to risk everything to shock audiences. Still, fame came at a cost. Fellow magicians accused him of being arrogant and relying on editing tricks, while others felt his style was more flash than substance. Criss brushed it off, knowing that controversy only fueled ticket sales. He once said, "I'd rather people hate me and watch than love me and forget." That philosophy turned his career into a money-making machine. By the end of the 2000s, Criss had transformed from a struggling street magician into a multi-million-dollar brand. His empire wasn't built on traditional magic alone. It was built on spectacle, personality, and relentless self-promotion. By the late 1980s, Criss had made a decision that defied every warning. Magic wasn't just his passion, it was his career path. While many young magicians found comfort in small birthday parties or corporate events, Criss sought something larger and darker. He fused his love of heavy metal and gothic rock with his illusions, building a persona that W as much performance artist as magician. Gone was the classic tuxedo and top hat. Criss wore black leather, eyeliner, and chains. He didn't want to look like a performer from the past, he wanted to look like the future. He dragged his act across the East Coast, performing in dive bars, nightclubs, tiny theaters, and street festivals. The grind was brutal. He often carried his own props, set up his stage equipment alone, and sometimes had to sleep in his car when he couldn't afford a room. What set him apart, however, was the atmosphere he created. His shows were less about traditional tricks and more about spectacle, music blaring, lights flashing, and illusions unfolding as if they were part of a rock concert. Some audiences were hooked instantly. Others dismissed him as a gimmick, but Criss kept pushing forward, convinced he was carving a new lane. Those years were lonely. He often admitted that performing for strangers night after night was exhilarating on stage, but empty off stage. The applause would fade, and he would return to silence, often questioning whether the sacrifices were worth it. But he kept investing every cent back into his act, building bigger and riskier illusions, levitations, escapes, endurance stunts that pushed his own body to the limit. His gamble paid off in the early 2000s when television took notice. Cable specials showcased his dangerous, edgy style, and in 2005, Mindfreak premiered. It was unlike anything the world had seen. Criss walked on water at the Bellagio fountains, levitated high above city streets, and escaped from impossible restraints. Audiences were stunned. Some claimed he relied on camera tricks, while others hailed him as the heir to Houdini. Either way, Criss had achieved what few magicians ever could. He wasn't just performing tricks, he had redefined the image of magic for a modern generation. Behind the eyeliner and the fireballs on stage, Criss's personal life was far more complicated. Fame had made him a household name, but it also thrust him into the glare of the tabloids. His relationships, often high-profile, became public drama. He was married briefly in the early 2000s, but the union collapsed amid the pressures of his career. Later, he was linked to celebrities and models, relationships that often ended just as publicly as they began. Criss was not shy about confrontation, and this extended into his professional rivalries. He feuded with fellow magicians, most notably David Blaine, mocking his endurance stunts and questioning his originality. Criss carried himself as though he were not only the most successful magician of his time, but also the only one willing to push the art forward. This arrogance earned him as many enemies as it did fans. Yet, despite the controversies, family remained central to his identity. Criss often spoke of his parents with reverence. His father's death in 1998 devastated him, and he has admitted it was one of the darkest moments of his life. The grief shaped his worldview and gave his performances a darker, more emotional edge. His mother, Dimitra, remained a source of grounding, appearing at many of his shows and reminding him of his roots. Away from the spotlight, Criss was known to be introverted, even shy. Colleagues described him as someone who could shift instantly between two worlds, the aggressive, confident stage persona and the quieter, more vulnerable man backstage. His lifestyle may have projected extravagance, with luxury homes, cars, and celebrity companions, but those close to him knew he battled periods of loneliness and emotional struggle. As his fame soared, Criss's private world became more fragile. The constant demand of live shows, media appearances, and business ventures weighed heavily on him. He was a man pulled in many directions, trying to balance the image of invincible illusionist with the reality of being a flawed, human son, brother, and partner. In 2015, Criss faced a battle that no illusion could ever make disappear. His son, Johnny Christopher, was only 2 years old when doctors delivered the devastating diagnosis. acute lymphoblastic leukemia, a rare and aggressive form of childhood cancer. For a man who had built a career around the impossible, this was a nightmare that stripped away every layer of invincibility. Suddenly, Criss was not the fearless magician defying death in front of millions. He was a father on his knees, powerless before the cruel reality of disease. At the time, Criss was deep into his Las Vegas residency and television commitments, but all of it came to a halt. He canceled shows, postponed projects, and shifted his focus entirely to being at his son's side. In interviews, his pain was raw and unfiltered. He admitted that for the first time in his life, magic felt meaningless. "What's the point of making people levitate?" he once said, "when you can't take the pain away from your own child?" The news shocked fans worldwide, and for the first time, the public saw beyond the black eyeliner and leather jackets. They saw Criss not as a celebrity, but as a grieving father holding on to hope. He launched the Johnny Christopher Children's Charitable Foundation, pouring his time, money, and influence into pediatric cancer research and family support. He organized charity shows, donated millions, and used his platform to bring awareness to the lack of funding for childhood cancer treatment. As the years went on, Johnny endured rounds of chemotherapy, hospital stays, and relapses. Criss often shared updates with fans, his voice breaking as he described his son's resilience. He described Johnny as his little superhero, a boy who fought with a bravery that humbled him more than any career achievement ever could. Through it all, Criss balanced his career and his role as a father, but his priorities had forever changed. The man who once lived for the spotlight now lived for his son's survival. For Criss, the stage had always been a place of control, but in this battle, control was an illusion. All he could do was fight alongside his child and hope the world of science and medicine would pull off the miracle he could not. Despite the personal devastation, Criss eventually found his way back to the stage. But this time, his performances carried a new weight. When Johnny's cancer entered remission, Criss returned to Las Vegas, reimagining his shows not just as entertainment, but as a reflection of his own journey through pain and survival. His production, Mindfreak Live, was darker, sharper, and more personal than before. The illusions were bigger, the stunts more daring, but audiences sensed something deeper behind them. An artist who had stared into the abyss and returned changed. Critics noted this shift in tone. Gone was the performer who seemed desperate to shock for the sake of headlines. Instead, Criss's acts began to weave in themes of mortality, resilience, and love. His levitations felt less like displays of power and more like metaphors for rising above tragedy. His escapes no longer looked like stunts. They looked like battles for freedom against unseen chains. For many fans, his art became more meaningful than ever, not because of the illusions themselves, but because of the story behind them. But even as his son's health improved, Criss knew the fight wasn't over. Pediatric cancer is a long and unpredictable road, and he often spoke about the constant fear of relapse. That fear gave him new drive to continue performing, not just for fame or wealth, but to fund his foundation and secure his family's future. Every show became more than a performance. It was an act of survival, both financial and emotional. His return to Vegas was met with sold-out crowds and lucrative contracts. Mindfreak Live became one of the Strip's most successful residencies, and Criss re-established himself as one of the highest-paid magicians in the world. Alongside his live shows, he expanded his empire with merchandise, television specials, and even streaming rights, all of which added to his growing wealth. Still, Criss often admitted that the stage no longer felt like home in the same way it once did. Backstage, his thoughts lingered on Johnny. He confessed that every standing ovation reminded him of what really mattered: family, not fame. And though his career was thriving once again, Criss knew that the legacy he was building wasn't just for his fans. It was for his son, for his family, and for the cause that had come to define his life beyond magic. By the time Criss had cemented himself as a Las Vegas headliner, his empire was no longer built only on magic. It was built on business acumen and relentless self-promotion. The boy from Long Island who once scraped by performing in small clubs now stood among the wealthiest magicians alive. Estimates placed his net worth at over $50 million, though insiders believed the true figure could be significantly higher when factoring in real estate, investments, and long-term contracts. The centerpiece of his fortune was his Las Vegas residencies. Mindfreak Live and Believe generated hundreds of millions in ticket sales over the years, with Criss taking a substantial share. Unlike other performers who relied solely on box office numbers, Criss expanded into licensing his image, creating a steady stream of royalties. His merchandise empire included clothing, jewelry, DVDs, and even branded magic kits, allowing fans to bring a piece of the Mindfreak mystique into their own homes. Real estate was another pillar of his wealth. Criss invested heavily in luxury properties, including sprawling estates in Las Vegas. These homes were not only places of comfort, but symbols of how far he had come from his modest upbringing. Some were designed with lavish features, private theaters, expansive pools, and performance spaces where he could test new illusions in secrecy. These investments grew in value over time, adding millions to his portfolio. Criss also diversified his income streams. He put money into stage technology companies, ensuring he had access to cutting-edge equipment for his shows while also profiting from the innovations themselves. He made wise moves in entertainment licensing, securing rights that would keep his shows streaming for new generations. Unlike many celebrities who squandered their fortune, Criss was known for being meticulous about his finances. Those close to him said he worked as hard behind the scenes as he did on stage, constantly negotiating, reinvesting, and strategizing. He understood that fame was fleeting, but wealth, if managed wisely, could endure. Estate planning reflects his experiences as both a performer and a father who nearly lost everything to illness. Much of his wealth is structured to ensure that Johnny and his siblings will be taken care of for life. This includes trust funds, real estate assets, and long-term investments designed to generate income well beyond Criss's lifetime. For a man who once knew the pain of watching medical bills pile up, ensuring his family never faces that uncertainty again became a top priority. The emotional weight of this legacy has been overwhelming for his family. Relatives have admitted that the mere discussion of his estate brings them to tears, not because of greed, but because of what it represents. A lifetime of effort transformed into a safety net for those he loves. His mother, Demetra, once spoke about her son's work ethic, saying he was driven beyond reason. Now, that drive means his children will inherit not just wealth, but stability. A significant portion of his estate is also expected to fund the Johnny Christopher Children's Charitable Foundation, ensuring that his fight against pediatric cancer continues even after he is gone. This decision reflects Criss's deepest wound and his greatest hope that his fortune might help other families avoid the pain his own endured. For fans, the thought of Criss's legacy is bittersweet. They remember the man who walked on water, who levitated above buildings, who made the impossible look effortless. But for his family, his legacy is far more human. A father, a son, and a brother who turned personal tragedy into a lasting gift. The tears his family sheds when discussing his fortune are not about money. They are about love, loss, and the enduring mark of a man who never stopped fighting for them. When people think of Criss, they think of spectacle, the man who levitated above the Luxor, who walked across the Bellagio fountains, who seemed to cheat death with every stunt. But when the curtain eventually falls, what he leaves behind will be far greater than illusions. His legacy is layered, both dazzling and deeply human. On one level, Criss will always be remembered as the magician who redefined what the craft could be in the modern age, pushing boundaries with his edgy persona and breathtaking stunts. On another level, his story is one of a father who carried unimaginable pain and used his platform to fight for something real. The fortune he leaves behind, the empire he built from nothing, isn't just numbers on a ledger. It's a testament to his refusal to give up. For his family, it's a reminder that every sleepless night, every risk, every scar from a stunt gone wrong, and every tear shed at a hospital bedside meant something. He turned struggle into security, heartbreak into hope, and pain into purpose. Even when his name is eventually spoken in past tense, Criss's presence will remain through his foundation, through his family, through the countless lives touched by his art and his advocacy. His greatest illusion was never the levitations, the escapes, or the vanishes. It was how he transformed the darkest parts of his life into something that could outlast him. And so, when his family cries over the fortune he leaves behind, they are not mourning money. They are mourning the man who made the impossible possible, who gave them everything he had, and who proved that even an illusionist could leave behind something very real.